Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. Part 2, Stage 1. Christiana. When he heard your lumbering noise, he gave a wonderful, innocent smile. I believe what you did pleased him well, for he showed no sign to the contrary. But I marvel in my heart why he keeps such a dog. Had I known that before, I should not have had heart enough to have ventured myself in this manner. But now we are in, and I am glad with all my heart. Mercy. I will ask, if you please, next time he comes down, why he keeps such a filthy cur in his yard. I hope he will not take it amiss. Do so, said the children, and persuade him to hang him, for we are afraid he will bite us when we go hence. So at last he came down to them again, and Mercy fell to the ground on her face before him, and worshipped, and said, Let my Lord accept the sacrifice of praise which I now offer unto him with the calves of my lips. So he said unto her, Peace be to thee, stand up. But she continued upon her face, and said, Righteous art thou, O Lord, when I plead with thee. Yet let me talk with thee of thy judgments. Jeremiah 12:1. Wherefore dost thou keep so cruel a dog in thy yard, at the sight of which such women and children as we are ready to fly from thy gate for fear? He answered and said, The dog has another owner. He also is kept close in another man's ground. Only my pilgrims hear his barking. He belongs to the castle which you see there at a distance, but can come up to the walls of this place. He has frighted many an honest pilgrim from worse to better by the great voice of his roaring. Indeed, he that owneth him doth not keep him out of any good will to me or mine, but with intent to keep the pilgrims from coming to me, and that they may be afraid to come and knock at this gate for entrance. Sometimes also he has broken out and has worried some that I loved, but I take all at present patiently. I also give my pilgrims timely help, so that they are not delivered to his power, to do with them what his doggish nature would prompt, what his doggish nature would prompt him to. But what my purchased one, I trow, hadst thou known never so much beforehand, thou wouldst not have been afraid of a dog. The beggars that go from door to door will, rather than lose a supposed alms, run the hazard of the bawling, barking, and biting too of a dog. And shall a dog in another man's yard, a dog whose barking I turn to the profit of pilgrims, keep any from coming to me, I deliver them from the lions and my darling from the power of the dog. Psalm 22, 21 and 22. Mercy. Then said Mercy, I confess my ignorance. I spake what I understood not. I acknowledge that thou doest all things well. I acknowledge that thou doest all things well. Christiana. Then Christiana began to talk of the journey. Then Christiana began to talk of their journey and to inquire after the way. So he fed them and washed their feet and set them in the way of his steps, according as he had dwelt with her husband before. According as he had dealt with her husband before. Pilgrim's Progress Part 2, the second stage. So I saw in my dream that they walked on their way and had the weather very comfortable to them. Then Christiana began to sing, saying, Blessed be the day that I began, a pilgrim for to be, and blessed also be the man that thereto moved me. It's true, it was long ere I began to seek to live forever, but now I run fast as I can. It's better late than never. Our tears to joy, our fears to faith, are turned as we see. Thus our beginning, as one saith, shows what our end will be. Now there was on the other side of the wall that fenced in the way up which Christiana and her companions were to go, a garden, and that garden belonged to him whose was that barking dog, of whom mention was made before, and some of the fruit trees that grew in that garden shot their branches over the wall, and being mellow, they that found them did gather them up and eat of them to their hurt. So, Christiana's boys, as boys are apt to do, being pleased with the trees and with the fruit that hung thereon, did pluck them and began to eat. Their mother did also chid them for so doing, but still the boys went on. Well, she said, well, said she, my sons, you transgress, for the fruit is none of ours. But she did not know that it belonged to the enemy. I will warrant you, if she had, she would have been ready to die for fear. But that passed, and they went on their way. Now by that they were gone about 2 bowshots from the place that led them into the way. They espied 2 very ill-favoured ones coming down apace to meet them. With that, Christiana and Mercy, her friend, covered themselves with their veils, and so kept on their journey. The children also went on before, so that at last they met together. Then they that came down to meet them came just up to the women, as if they would embrace them. But Christiana said, stand back, or go peaceably as you should, Yet these 2, as men that are deaf, regarded not Christiana's words, but began to lay hands upon them. At that Christiana, waxing very wroth, spurned at them with her feet. Mercy also, as well as she could, did what she could to shift them. Christiana again said to them, stand back and be gone, for we have no money to lose, being pilgrims, as you see, and such too as live upon the charity of our friends, ill-favoured ones. Then said one of the 2 men, we make no assault upon you for money, but are come out to tell you that if you will be grant one small request which we shall ask, we will make women of you forever. Christiana. Now Christiana, imagining what they should mean, made answer again, we will neither hear nor regard nor yield to what you shall ask. We are in haste and cannot stay. Our business is a business of life and death. So again she and her companion made a fresh essay to go past them, but they letted them in their way, ill-favoured ones. And they said, we intend no hurt to your lives. It is another thing we would have. Christiana. Aye, quoted Christiana. You would have us body and soul, for I know it is for that you are come. But we will die rather upon the spot than to suffer ourselves to be brought into such snares as such hazard our well-being hereafter. And with that they both shrieked out and cried, murder, murder, and so put themselves under those laws that are provided for the protection of women. Deuteronomy 22:25-27. But the men still made their approach upon them with design to prevail against them, They therefore cried out again. Now they begin, as I said, not far from the gate in at which they came. Their voice was heard from whence they were thither. Wherefore some of the house came out, and knowing that it was Christiana's tongue, they made haste to her relief. But by that they were got within sight of them. The women were in a very great scuffle. The children also stood crying by. Then did he that came in for their relief call out to the ruffians, saying, "What is that thing you do? Would you make my lord's people to transgress?" He also attempted to take them, but they did make their escape over the wall into the garden of the man to whom the great dog belonged. So the dog became their protector. This reliever then came up to the women and asked them how they did. So they answered, "We thank thy prince pretty well, only we have been somewhat affrighted. We thank thee also for that thou camest into our help, otherwise we had been overcome." Reliever. So after a few more words, this reliever said as followeth, "I marveled much when you were entertained at the gate above, seeking ye knew that ye were but weak women, that you petitioned not the Lord for a conductor. Then might you have avoided these troubles and dangers, for he would have granted you one." Christiana. "Alas," said Christiana, "we were so taken with our present blessing that dangers to come were forgotten by us. Besides, we could have thought that so near the king's palace there could have lurked such naughty ones. Indeed, it had been well for us had we asked our Lord for one, but since our Lord knew it would be for our profit, I wonder he sent not one along with us." Reliever. It is not always necessary to grant things not asked for, lest by so doing they become a little esteemed. But when the want of a thing is felt, it then comes under in the eyes of him that feels it, that estimate that properly is its due, and so consequently will be thereafter used. Had my Lord granted you a conductor, you would not either so have bewailed that oversight of yours in not asking for one, as now you have occasion to do. So all things work for good and tend to make you more wary. Christiana. Shall we go back again to my Lord and confess our folly and ask one? Reliever. Your confession of your folly I will present him with. To go back again you need not, for in all places where you shall come you will find no want at all. For in every one of my Lord's lodgings, which he has prepared for the reception of his pilgrims, there is sufficient to furnish them against all attempts whatsoever. But as I said, he will be inquired of by them to do it for them. Ezekiel 36:37. And it is a poor thing that is not worth asking for. When he had thus said, he went back to his place, and the pilgrims went on their way. Mercy. Then said Mercy, "What a sudden blank is here. I made account that we had been past all danger, and that we should never see sorrow more." Christiana. "Thy innocency, my sister," said Christiana to Mercy, "may excuse thee much. But as for me, my fault is so much the greater, for that I saw this danger before I came out of the doors, and yet did not provide for it when provision might have been had. I am much to be blamed. Mercy. Then said Mercy, how knew you this before you came from home? Pray open to me this riddle. Christiana. Why, I will tell you. Before I set foot out of my doors, before I set foot out of doors, one night as I lay in my bed, I had a dream about this. For methought I saw two men as like these are ever any in the world could look, stand at my bed's feet, plotting how they might prevent my salvation. I will tell you their very words. They said, it was when I was in my troubles. What shall we do with this woman? For she cries out, waking and sleeping, for forgiveness. If she be suffereth, do go on. If she be suffereth, do go on as she begins. We shall lose her as we have lost her husband. This, might have made me take heed and have provided when provision might have been had. Mercy. Well, said Mercy, as by this neglect we have an occasion ministered unto us to behold our own imperfections, so our Lord has taken occasion thereby to make manifest the riches of His grace, for He, as we see, has followed us with unasked kindness, and has delivered us from their hands that were stronger than we, of His mere good pleasure. Thus now, when they had talked away a little more time, they drew near to a house which stood in the way, which house was built for the relief of pilgrims, as you will find more fully related in the first part of these records of the Pilgrim's progress. So they drew on towards the house of the interpreter. And when they came to the door, they heard a great talk in the house. Then they gave ear and heard, as they thought, Christiana mentioned by name. For you must know that there went along, even before her, a talk of her and her children's going on pilgrimage, and this was the most pleasing to them, because they had heard that she was Christian's wife, that woman who was some time ago so unwilling to hear of going on pilgrimage. Thus, therefore, they stood still and heard the good people within commending her, who they little thought stood at the door. At last Christiana knocked, as she had done at the gate before. Now when she had knocked, there came to the door a young damsel, and opened the door, and looked, and behold, two women were there. The damsel. Then said the damsel to them, with whom would you speak in this place? Christiana. Christiana answered, we understand that this is a privileged place for those that are become pilgrims, and we know at this door are such. Wherefore we pray that we may be partakers of that for which we at this time are come. For the time, as thou seest, is very far spent, and we are loath tonight to go any further. The damsel. Pray, what may I call your name, that I may tell it to my lord within? Christiana. My name is Christiana. I was the wife of that pilgrim that some years ago did travel this way, and these be his 4 children. This maiden also is my companion and is going on pilgrimage too. Innocent. Then Innocent ran in, for that was her name, and said to those within, "Can you think who is at the door? There is Christiana and her children and her companion, all waiting for entertainment here." Then they leaped for joy and went and told their master. So he came to the door and, looking upon her, he said, "Art thou that Christiana whom Christian the good man left behind him when he betook himself to a pilgrim's life?" "Christiana, I am that woman that was so hard-hearted as to slight my husband's troubles, and that left him to go on in his journey alone. And these are his 4 children, but now I also am come, for I am convinced that no way is right but this." Interpreter. Then is fulfilled that which is written of the man that said to his son, "Go work today in the vineyard." And he said to his father, "I will not," but afterwards repented and went. Matthew 21:29. Christiana. Then said Christiana, "So be it, Amen. God made it a true saying upon me, and grant that I may be found at the last of him in peace, without spot and blameless." Interpreter. But why standest thou thus at the gate? But why standest thou thus at the door? Come in, thou daughter of Abraham. We are talking of thee but now, for tidings have come to us before, how thou art become a pilgrim. Come, children, come in, come, maiden, come in. Come, children, come in, come, maiden, come in. So he had them all into the house. So when they were within, they were bidden to sit down and rest them. The which when they had done, those that attended upon the pilgrims in the house came into the room to see them. And one smiled, and another smiled, and they all smiled for joy that Christiana was become a pilgrim. They also looked upon the boys. They stroked them over their faces with the hand in token of their kind reception of them. They also carried it lovingly to Mercy, and bid them all welcome into their master's house. After a while, because supper was not ready, the interpreter took them into his significant rooms and showed them what Christiana's husband had seen some time before. Here therefore they saw the man in the cage, the man and his dream, the man that cut his way through his enemies, and the picture of the biggest of them all, together with the rest of those things that were then so profitable to Christian. This done, and after those things had been somewhat digested by Christiana and her company, the interpreter takes them apart again, and has them first into a room where a man that could look no way but downwards, with a muckrake in his hand. There stood also one over his head with a celestial crown in his hand, and proffered him that crown for his muckrake. But the man did neither look up nor regard, but raked to himself the straws, the small sticks and dust of the floor. Then said Christiana, "I persuade myself that I know somewhat the meaning of this, for this is a figure of a man of this world. Is it not, good sir?" Interpreter. "Thou hast said right," said he, "and his muckrake doth show his carnal mind. And whereas thou seest him rather give heed to rake up straws and sticks and the dust of the floor, than to do what he says that calls to him from above with the celestial crown in his hand. It is to show that heaven is but as a fable to some, and that things here are counted the only things substantial. Now, whereas it was also showed thee that the man could look no way but downwards, it is to let thee know that earthly things, when they are with power upon men's mind, quite carry their hearts away from God. Christiana. Then said Christiana, "Oh, deliver me from this muckrake." Proverb 38. Interpreter. That prayer, said the interpreter, has lain by till it is almost rusty. Give me not riches is scarce the prayer of 1 in 10,000. Straws and sticks and dust with most are the great things now looked after. With that Christiana and Mercy wept and said, "It is alas too true." When the interpreter had shown them this, he had them into the very best room in the house. A very brave room it was, so he bid them look round about and see if they could find anything profitable there. Then they looked round and round, for there was nothing to be seen but a very great spider on the wall, and that they overlooked. Mercy. Then said Mercy, "Sir, I see nothing." But Christiana held her peace. Interpreter. But, said the interpreter, "Look again." She therefore looked again and said, "Here is not anything but an ugly spider, who hangs by her hands upon the wall." Then said he, "Is there but one spider in all this spacious room?" Then the water stood in Christiana's eyes, for she was a woman quick of apprehension, and she said, "Yea, Lord, there are more here than one, yea, and spiders whose venom is far more destructive than that which is in her." The interpreter then looked pleasantly on her and said, "Thou hast said the truth." This made Mercy to blush, and the boys to cover their faces, for they all began now to understand the riddle. Then said the interpreter again, "The spider taketh hold with her hands, as you see, and is in kings' palaces." Proverb 30:28. And wherefore is this recorded? But to show you that how full of the venom of sin soever you be, yet you may, by the hand of faith, lay hold of and dwell in the best room that belongs to the king's house above. Christiana. I thought, said Christiana, of something of this, but I could not imagine it at all. I thought that we are like spiders, and that we looked like ugly creatures in what fine room soever we were, but that by the spider, that venomous and ill-favored creature, we were to learn how to act. Faith that came not into my thoughts, and yet she had taken hold with her hands, and, as I see, dwelleth in the best room in the house. God has made nothing in vain. Then they seemed all to be glad, but the water stood in their eyes, yet they looked one upon another, and also bowed before the interpreter. He had them into another room, where were a hen and chickens, and bid them observe a while. So one of the chickens went to the trough to drink, and every time she drank, she lifted up her head and her eyes towards heaven. "See," said he, "with this little chick doth, and learn of her to acknowledge whence your mercies come, by receiving them with looking up." Yet again said he, "Observe and look." So they gave heed, and perceived that the hen did walk in a fourfold method towards her chickens. 1. She had a common call, and that she hath all the day long. 2nd, she had a special call, and that she had but sometimes. 3rd, she had a brooding note, Matthew 23:37. And 4th, she had an outcry. Now, said he, compare this hen to your king, and these chickens to his obedient ones. For answerable to her, he himself hath his methods which he walketh in towards his people. By his common call he gives nothing. By his special call he always has something to give. He has also a brooding voice for them that are under his wing, and he has an outcry to give the alarm when he seeth the enemy come. I choose, my darlings, to lead you into the room where such things are, because you are women and they are easy for you. Christiana. And sir, said Christiana, pray let us see some more. So he had them into the slaughterhouse, where was a butcher killing a sheep, and behold, the sheep was quiet, and took her death patiently. Then said the interpreter, you must learn of the sheep to suffer and to put up with wrongs without murmurings and complaints. Behold, how quietly she takes her death, and without objecting. She suffereth her skin to be pulled out her ears. Your king doth call you his sheep. After this he led them into his garden, where was great variety of flowers. And he said, do you see all this? Said Christiana. So said Christiana, yes. So Christiana said, yes. So Christiana said, yes. Then said he again, behold, the flowers are diverse in stature, in quality and color and smell and virtue, and some are better than others. Also, where the gardener has set them, there they stand, and quarrel not one with another. Again, he had them into his field, which he had sown with wheat and corn. But when they beheld the tops of all were cut off, and only the straw remained, he said again, the ground was dunged and ploughed and sowed, but what shall we do with the crop? Then said Christiana, burn some and make muck of the rest. Then said the interpreter again, fruit, you see, is that thing you look for, and for want of that you condemn it to the fire, and to be trodden under foot of men. Beware that in this